P. Diddy leaves the Metropolitan Detention Center jail in Brooklyn. New reports say he was taken to the hospital for a few hours last week to get an MRI. We're just now learning about this, though, because Diddy was taken from the jail late at night.
The world is in absolute shock as reports emerge from inside the walls of one of America's most notorious prisons, where Sean Diddy Combs, once the face of power, fame, and luxury, has been attacked just days after his sentencing.
So apparently Diddy's knee has been bothering him recently, so he reported it. At some point, it was decided that he needed medical care outside of the jail, so he was taken to a Brooklyn hospital. He was only gone for a couple of hours and came straight back to MDC after his MRI was finished. Diddy's attorney Mark Agnifilo told TMZ, quote, "I cannot comment on anything related to prisoner movements. Also, I'm not commenting on anything related to possible medical issues." A statement from the Federal Bureau of Prisons was released too. It says, quote, "For privacy, safety, and security reasons, we do not comment on the conditions of confinement for anyone in our custody, to include medical status or medical trips." Well, the Federal Bureau of Prisons may not be able to comment on all of this, but I do know someone who can. I'm going to bring in Dr. Dwayne Hendricks, a former corrections officer and deputy warden right there at MDC. Dwayne, thanks for coming on with us once again. You're a friend of the show and give us a great interview every time. And what I wanted to ask you about today is Diddy leaving MDC to go to the hospital. Is this a big undertaking?
Not necessarily. Only in the format that it happened with him leaving later in the evening. Typically, inmates are given a physical within the first 14 days of their arrival. And if there's anything that indicates that needs immediate follow-up, the medical team there will follow up immediately. However, if there's some procedures or some sort of medical processes they need to go through that are not available at the institution, or they can't bring someone in like a specialist to come in to perform that medical process at the institution, they will schedule medical trips on a monthly basis. And there's a review team that goes over those trips every month. And but this particular process was a little bit different because, as you know, most doctors' offices and most folks that do MRIs and X-rays and things of that nature, they're on a normal work schedule, between, the normal business hours of maybe 10 o'clock and maybe 6 p.m. So in that case, this was a little bit different, getting him outside the facility in the late evening hours to do just, possibly a basic MRI.
Yeah, I was thinking about the timeline too, because I don't ever recall going to the doctor at 10 p.m. at night. As you said, it's usually 9 to 5, 10 to 6 kind of vibes. But for P. Diddy, I can kind of understand why it was at 10 p.m. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking they decided to do this because he's such a high profile name that they wouldn't want to draw attention to it. I mean, this is an unassuming Thursday night around 10 p.m. Could that be why they decided then to go to the hospital?
Yes, and also, for a couple of reasons, staff, many correctional agencies are short-staffed, so when you're taking someone out with this high-profile person such as P. Diddy, just the nature of who he is going to cause a serious security concern because you're going to need to be able to stave off, onlookers, fans, media, and the like. And then you also got to think about the security of the hospital and their operations. People are there to try to get better. You have families there to visit their loved ones. And the last thing you need is somewhat, a chaotic environment that's causing concern with security. And also, most people don't know this, but he's actually under the primary custody. He's a what we call a U.S. Marshals inmate because he's on pretrial status. So the Bureau, the agency, the Bureau of Prisons oversees, the operations with overseeing the inmates on a day-to-day basis. However, when they're in the hospital for an extended period of time, if there's no deal worked out between the local institution and the local marshal's office, it would be the marshal's responsibility to take custody of that particular inmate. So, but back to your original question. Yes, he is definitely taken out at that time, and I'm sure this arrangement was made weeks in advance to make sure that.
The man who once ruled the charts, who commanded the attention of millions, who walked through life surrounded by security, cameras, and adoration, is now facing the brutal, unfiltered reality of prison life, and it's nothing like the world he came from. Witnesses are saying that chaos erupted behind bars, and Diddy, for the first time in his life, was seen in tears. Those close to the situation say that it happened suddenly. There were no warnings, no signs, no time to react. One moment, Diddy was trying to adjust to the grim rhythm of prison life, and the next, violence broke out around him. The air was thick with tension, with the kind of danger that never sleeps in a place where power means survival. He was cornered, overwhelmed, and struck, his fame offering no protection this time. The mogul who once built empires, who once sat at the top of the entertainment world, now found himself struggling just to stay on his feet. The attack reportedly left Diddy shaken to his core. For someone who lived his entire life in control, commanding rooms, commanding people, and commanding the spotlight, this was something he could not control. The guards rushed in, chaos filling the corridors, shouts echoing off concrete walls.
Technician or that clinician was going to be available to take a look at whatever issues that he may be experiencing right now. So that way, there's not a whole lot of onlookers. And then even with staff and other inmates, it gives them not an opportunity to make a call, to their family. Hey, I think, Diddy's going out to the hospital right now. If anybody wants to take a look at him, head out there. And then I think the other thing, Sierra, is since there are no cameras in the courthouse throughout this process, we've only been getting the sketch artist views of their perspective of what he looks like. And I think people have been talking about him losing weight and different things of that nature. So I know folks will probably want to be able to get a photo of him to see what he actually looks like. And and if he does have issues with his legs, is he walking with a limp? Does he have a does he have a cane or anything like that? So yeah, I think that will be the reason why that they would make this, take this measure, which I have never seen in my career. Someone taken out to the hospital at this time of night for something as basic as an MRI.
Oh, that's interesting that this is the first time you've ever seen anything like this, because there have been high profile inmates at MDC in the past, maybe not to the level of P. Diddy. You had a lot of answers in that one answer, so many different roads I could go down. And I agree with you 100%. People would want that photo. We would be talking about that photo today if for some reason we got it. So that's a super valid point. I wanted to go back to the very beginning though, because how does all of this start? Does P. Diddy go to one of the corrections officers and say, hey, my knee's really bothering me, I'm not feeling well? Would he go to an infirmary on site? What would the early process look like?
So again, after that initial review of his current medical situation during his physical, and then there's follow up to that process if there's something found, immediately. But you have to understand, daily there are medical staff walking through the units, doing what we call sit call and asking inmates, are they okay? And then you have folks that are walking around passing out meds and different things of that nature. And then he can also reach out to the medical team by what we call an inmate to staff correspondence form, whether electronically or in writing. And he can say, hey, I've had chronic issues with my knee for several years. And I'm saying there's reports that after he ran the New York City Marathon in 2003, that he had some ongoing issues with one of his knees. So that's how that initial process would start. And then and if it's nothing like emergent, because again, if his knee was bothering him to the point where he fell out or something like that in the evening, then obviously they would take him to the hospital right away. It wouldn't be a thing where they would schedule that out. But in terms of something that basic, that would have to be looked at well in advance, and then they would make that appointment and then reach out to the hospital staff and say, hey, can you get someone that can, one, keep their mouth shut, that's going to be on schedule to work overtime or switch their schedule to do this particular procedure? Can they keep their mouth shut and not expose that, hey, we're going to bring him out into the community for a couple of hours to do this process? So there had to be some high level planning, not just at the local institution and the local hospital, but obviously probably at the regional office level and maybe even at the DOJ level, saying that, hey, this individual is going to be going out for a short period of time to make sure that they're taking care of these issues that he may or may not be having with his knee.
Yeah, the planning into all of this, based on what you're saying, does sound like it.
Diddy, clutching himself, his face showing a mixture of fear, disbelief, and pain, was led away. Those who saw it said the look in his eyes told the whole story. This was no longer the Diddy the world knew. The confidence, the ego, the image, all of it had been stripped away, replaced by raw terror and desperation. And now, as news of the attack spreads, the entertainment world is reeling. How did it come to this? How did one of the most successful, celebrated, and influential figures in hip-hop end up in such a dangerous, degrading position? The fall from power has been swift, brutal, and public. The man who once stood as a symbol of success and dominance is now reduced to tears behind bars. Every new headline, every new leak from inside the prison paints a picture more tragic than the last. Sources close to Diddy's legal team say that he's struggling to cope with the reality of his new life. The prison environment is nothing like the one he's used to. It's cold, merciless, and governed by rules he cannot bend. His money doesn't matter.
It's a jail. People in that jail are being held, they're presumed innocent, and there's responsibility, since the person's not free to do what they want, to protect them and to make sure that they're mentally stable and that they're protected.
When I heard Suicide Watch, my mind went to Rex Heuermann, who's the alleged Go-Go Beach killer. Obviously, he is still presumed innocent at this time, but I do recall after he was arrested, he was placed on Suicide Watch. And I'm wondering if that's just kind of another thing, because it was a big case, a big name, that he was not suicidal at the time, and it's possible now that P. Diddy isn't suicidal.
That's something that's very difficult to really answer, because we're not doing the interviews of the inmate. The inmate gets an evaluation when they come in. They get checked for their health, their physical health, as well as their mental health. And that's where those sort of decisions are made. It's not just sort of something because it's P. Diddy, we're putting him in. They have to have some sort of facts to substantiate that.
Let's say moving forward that they determine, okay, he's fine, he is not a risk for suicide, he's good to go. Do you think that P. Diddy could ever be placed in general population? Obviously, he's someone that a lot of people know. First of all, high profile, but then also he's got some pretty severe allegations that he's up against. Would he be safe in Gen Pop?
That's a very difficult question. I think because of if I was his attorney, I would want to make sure that he was being kept in a place where he's safe and not be used as some sort of way that some inmate may want to just move their street credibility, for lack of a better term, by just saying, yeah, I went after P. Diddy because, he wasn't supposed to be doing those things and all that. So it's a very difficult situation when someone that famous and well known in this kind of case is put into general population. So it's going to be a major concern for the institution that is holding them.
Now, let's take a look back at the timeline leading up to Diddy's arrest and the allegations that led to Diddy's indictment. Shocking federal charges brought against once beloved music icon Sean P. Diddy Combs now could be his complete fall from grace.
I mean, it was only a year ago that he got the key to the city here in New York. And now here he is indicted in the Southern District, right? So what happened in a year for someone to have fallen so far?
But what led up to these serious federal charges? We're talking to criminal defense attorney Adam Conta to break down the timeline leading up to Diddy's arrest. I'm Sierra Gillespie, and this is Law and Crime News. Now, starting off from where we're at right now, Diddy faces 3 federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. So how did we get here? We have to head back to the 1990s, when Diddy first rose to fame after creating the record label Bad Boy Records that represented artists like the Notorious B.I.G. or Biggie Smalls. It was during this time frame that Diddy allegedly sexually assaulted multiple women in New York. We first learned about these allegations in November of last year, when Joy Dickerson-Neal and Liza Gardner filed separate civil suits against Diddy. Gardner says her assault happened back in 1990 when she met Diddy at a work event. She alleges he raped her and later choked her to the point that she passed out. The next year, in 1991, Joy Dickerson-Neal says Diddy raped her while she was a student at Syracuse University. She says Diddy even recorded this alleged sexual assault and passed the tape around to other people. So these things allegedly happened in the early 90s, but they're not made public then. As the years pass by, Diddy's career just keeps on gaining steam. By the late 90s, Diddy himself begins putting out songs, even snagging his first 2 Grammys in 1998. But the following year marks the next stop.
His fame doesn't matter. His influence, once limitless, now counts for nothing. Inside those walls, he's just another inmate. And the weight of that truth is crushing him. He's said to be isolated, fearful, constantly looking over his shoulder. And after this latest attack, his lawyers are reportedly preparing an urgent appeal, arguing that his safety is at risk, that he cannot survive in general population, that he must be transferred or released. But the system doesn't bend easily. The same judge who handed down his sentence is unlikely to show sympathy now. The world outside might still be buzzing with every update, but inside, the rules are different. Diddy is learning, painfully and publicly, that no amount of power can protect him from the consequences of his actions. The brutal attack, according to some reports, may have been meant as a message, a reminder that in prison, everyone is equal, and fame means nothing. Fans are split. Some are horrified, saying that no one,
On the Diddy timeline, the New York nightclub shooting. 3 people were shot, though no one suffered any life-threatening injuries. Diddy, the rapper Shine, and a man named Jamal Barrow were all arrested, and so was Diddy's then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez. J-Lo's charges were dropped, but both Diddy and Shine went to trial. Diddy was acquitted, but Shine was convicted on charges of attempted murder and criminal possession of a weapon. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now, in recent months, there's been allegations that Shine took the fall for Diddy, and on top of that he forced J-Lo to carry an illegal weapon. All of this leads us into the new millennium, though. A woman, only identified as Jane Doe, says Diddy raped her in 2003 when she was just 17. In the lawsuit she filed last year, she included pictures of herself at Diddy's recording studio in New York. From there, we fast forward to late 2005 or 2006, when Diddy met Cassandra Ventura, who would later be known publicly as the singer Cassie. According to Cassie's lawsuit, she started working with Diddy when she was just 19 years old, and he was 37. She says Diddy began, quote, almost immediately asserting possession and control over her, and inserting himself into all aspects of her career and her personal life. That includes things like forcing Cassie to use illegal drugs and have sex with prostitutes as Diddy watched or masturbated. She also alleges he recorded many of these interactions. The next stop on the Diddy timeline is 2011, when Cassie had a brief flirtatious relationship with rapper Kid Cudi. She says that in 2012, Diddy told her that he was going to blow up Kid Cudi's car and that he wanted to ensure that Kid Cudi was home with his friends when it happened. Around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway. From there, we have to hop to September 2022, when Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod, began working with Diddy. For the next year and a half, Lil Rod alleges he suffered abuse, all at the hands of Diddy himself. At times, Lil Rod says Diddy touched his private areas without consent and forced Lil Rod to watch him shower or have naked body massages. Lil Rod says Diddy, quote, attempted to groom Mr. Jones into engaging in gay sex. Then, in 2023, Cassie filed a lawsuit against Diddy under the New York Survivors Act, meaning a sexual assault survivor could file civil suit against their alleged abuser regardless of the statute of limitations. So Cassie filed that suit on November 16th of last year, and though it was settled just one day later, the damage was already done. Before the year's end, Diddy also faced lawsuits from Liza Gardner, Joy Dickerson-Neal, and Jane Doe. After this, Hulu dropped plans for a reality show called Diddy Plus 7 that was supposed to be about the singer and his family. At the same time, other major brands that he had worked with over the years severed ties. That brings us to February 26, 2024, when Lil Rod filed his lawsuit. Just about a month later, on March 25th, federal investigators raided 2 of Diddy's homes in both Los Angeles and Miami. The same day, Diddy's alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul, was arrested at the Miami airport. He was charged with cocaine and marijuana possession, but avoided any jail time with a plea deal that required him to enter a drug diversion program. That moves us to April 4th, when Diddy is named a co-defendant in yet another civil lawsuit, this time involving the sexual assault of a woman on a yacht. Diddy's son, Christian, or King Combs, is also listed in the suit. Over the next few weeks, Diddy then files motions to dismiss several of the civil lawsuits against him, but he makes news once again on May 17th when CNN releases shocking surveillance video showing Diddy brutally attack Cassie in a hotel hallway. 2 days later, on May 19th, Diddy posted this to his Instagram.
I was f***ed up. I mean, I hit rock bottom. but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that.
Regardless of their crimes, deserves to face violence behind bars. Others are less sympathetic, arguing that karma has finally caught up with him, that this is the reality he created through years of unchecked behavior. Social media is on fire with debates, with hashtags trending, with theories about who was behind the attack and whether it was random or orchestrated. Every opinion, every rumor, every detail adds fuel to a fire that shows no sign of burning out. Inside his cell, Diddy is said to be a different man now. The bravado is gone, the charm, the laughter, the self-assured confidence that once defined him, gone. In its place is silence, fear, and reflection. Some insiders claim he's been crying at night, unable to sleep, haunted by memories of the world he once ruled and terrified by the one he's trapped in now. Those same sources say he's been reaching out to his lawyers daily, desperate for updates, desperate for any sign that this nightmare might end. For someone who once prided himself on being unstoppable, untouchable, and unbreakable, this moment marks the end of an illusion. Diddy's reality is now one of constant fear, constant.
Sean Combs should not be in jail for this conduct. In fact, he may be the only person currently in a United States jail for being any sort of John, and certainly the only person in jail for hiring adult male escorts for him and his girlfriend when he did not even have sex with the escort himself. Over the last 75 years, the White Slave Traffic Act has been limited to defendants who cause interstate travel for financial gain through the business of prostitution. That Sean Combs remains in jail for being convicted of being a customer of consensual adult sex services makes this case truly exceptional. Not only is prosecuting the users of adult prostitution services inconsistent with the Mann Act, it's inconsistent with the prosecution policies of the district attorneys of Manhattan and the city attorney of Los Angeles, California, two of the three locations where this prostitution allegedly took place. In addition, Mr. Combs is incarcerated while everyone else involved in this identical conduct, his girlfriends, the cowboys, the agency leaders, the porn stars, and others, walk free, as they should. If there was ever a fact pattern that was exceptional under the Mann Act, it is this one. And then they move on to another argument, that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has usually only charged Mann Act violations when there's financial gain. And they even cite a number of cases in the Southern District of New York, where Combs was prosecuted, that apparently involved defendants that set up a prostitution business for profit. Again, trying to distinguish between Combs' conduct and these cases. He never did any of this for profit, they argued. And they even cite the 1953 U.S. Attorney's Manual that says, quote, as a general rule, prosecution should not be instituted in the so-called non-commercial cases. And they claim the Department of Justice manual today, quote, makes clear that the prosecution of customers involved in an 18 U.S.C. 2421 offense, like Mr. Combs here, is now limited to prosecuting those who engage in commercial sex with victims of sex trafficking, in addition to those who otherwise perpetrate or facilitate human trafficking offenses. And in the absence of any sex trafficking charge, however, it is clear that the standalone Mann Act counts never would have been prosecuted. That seems true. I think you ask any legal expert, they will say if all the government had against Sean Combs was the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, just the prostitution charges, they probably wouldn't have gone after him. They coupled it with racketeering and they coupled it with sex trafficking. I agree with that. I don't think that they would have gone after him just for that. Anyway, the defense highlights how modern day prosecutions of Johns is really when you're talking about exploiting vulnerable foreigners who don't speak English well, which again is not the case here. And they highlight how the only potentially comparable case in New York is where you had a retired police officer and a former judge who apparently hired women to have sex with a male fraternal group called the Jesters. But Combs' attorneys say, while there was no profit there, there's no profit here, there was sex trafficking of those prostitutes. That's what's different. Again, Combs was acquitted of sex trafficking in this case. And here's the main point, quote, moreover, the cases which involve defendants similarly situated to Mr. Combs have been released on bond pending sentencing. In reviewing the cases across the country where the primary or sole conviction was for a violation of 18 U.S.C. 2421, the defendants who were not charged with running a prostitution,
uncertainty, and constant danger, the world outside may still remember the music, the empire, the parties, but inside, none of that matters. Inside, survival is the only goal, and right now, even that seems uncertain. The industry is watching closely. Every artist, every producer, every executive who once stood beside him is silent. The partnerships are gone, the endorsements vanished, the empire dismantled. What's left is a man stripped of everything: wealth, power, status, and forced to face himself in the harshest environment imaginable. The same energy that built him up is now gone, and in its place is the haunting reality that he may never rebuild. As the investigation into the attack continues, one question hangs heavy in the air: will Diddy make it out of this alive? His lawyers insist that if he's not moved to safer conditions, his life remains in grave danger. The attack has already proven how vulnerable he is, and if no changes are made, it may only be a matter of time before something
prostitution business have been released pending sentencing. And then Combs' attorneys make another argument for why Combs' conditions are exceptional. And it's about him being locked up at the MDC. They say that a district court judge in the Southern District in another case basically said how bad the MDC is. As Judge Furman noted, the state of affairs at MDC is unacceptable. In so noting, Judge Furman concluded that the conditions in the MDC qualify as exceptional reasons under the statute, justifying, and this was the defendant in this case, Chavez's continuing release. Judge Furman found that the conditions at the MDC are, quote, dreadful in many respects, but three warrant particular emphasis. 1. Continued reports of inordinate periods of lockdown. 2. Claims that the facility provides inadequate and or substantially delayed necessary medical care, a particular risk in this case. And 3, general issues about the conditions at the facility. These conditions have not abated in Mr. Combs' detention at the facility. As the court is aware, during Mr. Combs' incarceration at the MDC, the facility was subject to an interagency sweep that was designed to achieve our shared goal of maintaining a safe environment for both our employees and the incarcerated individuals housed at MDC Brooklyn. They're actually quoting what the rationale was. In other words, there is a significant issue at the MDC related to the safety of employees and incarcerated individuals that require outside law enforcement action from multiple agencies to address. Importantly, MDC, as a jail, has a significant law enforcement presence within its walls 24 hours per day that are equipped with investigatory and often unregulated authority. Thus, the requirement of outside law enforcement agencies to ensure safety within the MDC is an admission that serious violence, mayhem, and chaos is occurring within the MDC that requires more than a Band-Aid raid, but rather surgery. Indeed, we are aware of ongoing threats of violence and actual violence in the facility, such that Mr. Combs' safety is constantly at risk. And they go on to argue, though Mr. Combs has been a model inmate for his nearly year-long period of confinement, the violent conditions are still very much a concern for Mr. Combs and is an unnecessary confinement risk given the clear precedent of multiple similarly situated Mann Act convictions where defendants were released on conditions. Now, the government, by the way, would probably disagree with that statement of him being a model inmate. Remember when they accused Combs of trying to arrange three-way phone calls and buying the use of other inmates' phone privileges to try to make sure the government wasn't listening in, that he was having these private conversations, that he was allegedly trying to contact witnesses in the case, that he allegedly orchestrated a birthday campaign to help his public image while he was locked up. So if we hear a government response, I'm sure they're going to say something about that. Then the defense highlights he's not a risk of flight, he's not a danger to the community, which, by the way, I think are real key points here. But they seem to echo a lot of the same arguments that they have already stated to the court. And remember, they haven't been successful in the past. That he voluntarily came to New York last year to surrender himself to authorities, that he gave up his passport to his attorneys 6 months before his arrest, paid off his mortgage on his Miami home so it was free and clear for him to stay at while out on bond. He was just acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing, which, by the way, carried decades, if not life in prison. That he's not a risk of flight. That's the basic argument. Now, when it comes to the danger argument, That is key. Why? Judge Subramanian had said after the verdict that the reason he
worse happens. And while Diddy's team scrambled to push for an emergency transfer or early release, the internet was ablaze with speculation. Some said the attack was revenge, payback from people he had wronged in the industry. Others claimed it was gang-related. A few even suggested that word had spread inside the prison about his high-profile connections and rumored secrets, making him a target. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: Diddy's time behind bars had just become a nightmare. The man who had once been surrounded by luxury now lived in fear for his life every single day. His fans were split, some expressing sympathy, others saying it was karma catching up to him. Celebrities weighed in too. Some sent prayers, others stayed silent. The industry that once celebrated him now watched from a distance, unsure how to react. Inside his isolation cell, Diddy sat on his bunk, staring at the concrete wall. The swelling on his face had gone down, but the bruises were still fresh, a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. The reality was undeniable. He was no longer the man in control. He was no longer the one calling the shots. He was just another prisoner trying to survive. Days turned into weeks, and the fear never left. The guards rotated constantly, his meals were brought separately, and even the smallest noise made him jump. The attack had changed everything. It stripped away the last bit of pride he had left. When his lawyer returned for another visit, Diddy didn't speak at first. He just sat there, staring blankly. Finally, he whispered, "I'm not gonna make it in here." His lawyer sighed heavily, promising to do everything possible to get him transferred to a safer facility. But Diddy knew deep down that no amount of lawyering could erase the mark he now carried inside those walls. The man who once lived above the world was now living in constant fear of it. The legend of Sean Diddy Combs wasn't written on platinum records anymore. It was written in bruises, in sleepless nights, and in the echoes of a prison that had finally swallowed him whole. The world is watching. The cameras might not be inside the cell, but every whisper, every report, every detail that escapes those walls feeds the same tragic narrative. Diddy, once the king of an empire, is now a prisoner of his own fate. The tears, the pleas, the attacks, it all serves as a brutal reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, is above consequence. From the mansions to the prison yard, from platinum plaques to steel bars, the story of Sean Diddy Combs has turned into a cautionary tale of what happens when the empire you build turns into the cage that traps you. And now, as chaos erupts behind bars, the man who once made the world dance can do nothing but face the music of his own making.